On the right hand side, promise
Promise
perform.
Cap.
If it,
Yeah.
purpose kept, if it wasn't kept, why the reason, right? And there were some people who in the party who told me should take that chance because he's exposing himself to too much criticism of what he said. No, the information is there wants to be performed. You have nothing to hide. If I talk about information, he's the one. He coined the phrase "open government" in Barbados. We talk about transparency and accountability, etc. He coined the phrase "open government." And Henry Ford was a leading light with the law, reform of the law, way of the law in that regard. And so we had the promise of performance listed. So that is the kind of quality team of Sir Rich Henry. Sir Henry was a part. But Sir Henry also a very affable, charming, agreeable man, articulate, um, obviously bright before being pretentious and talking
Yes.
out to people. Very, very engaging, always with a smile. But and he has been praised considerably for a lot of things in Barbados. So, but there are things. There's a particular story which I'll tell you, which I don't think not many people, the public, general public of Barbados will have heard. Because I worked with him in his when he became leader of the opposition. I worked with him at that time, and then 86, and then I worked with him in 91 campaign, in 1991 campaign when he was leader of the Barbados Labour Party. I remember Barbados Labour Party had been reduced to 14 to 3 in 1986. Uh,
Yep.
I, I was himself, David Simmons, and Owen Arthur, who were called the Three Blind Mice. And
Yes, I
those
remember that.
and those three men took on the might of the Barbados Labour Party, of the Democratic Labour Party, and gave them a run for them on three men. So then the number of seats increased in the 91 election. But he led the party in the 91 election. And joined, and I think it was up by you, you know. My mind tells me he made some revelations about the economy of Barbados uh, that had many people in the country upset. And I think the meeting took place at Market Hill, down by the gas station. My mind tells me that
Uh-huh.
it's true. Yes, that's right. He he gave us that information because the then ruling Democratic Party and the Prime Minister, uh, Erskine Sandiford, was praising the performance of the Barbados economy. And Mr. Ford brought information to show that the Barbados performing, the economy was performing way below what it was said to be, and that if we were not careful, we could have been and would be on our way to the IMF. He never, of course, that caused consternation in society. The DLP conquered it and challenged him to prove it. But he had gotten the information. And this one, I was part of the whole scenario, so I know I'm talking about. It's not secondhand information from a source abroad. And these were not the days when doctors used to fall off a truck or there were whistleblowers. And because he had given his, because, or he had red bags and what. This was
Yes.
a different era. This where integrity and honesty and morals and a certain behavior meant something. He had given his word not to reveal even the institution from which this material came. And he was challenged to produce it, and he refused bluntly to give even hint at the source, the institution from which it came. And it was then therefore portrayed by the Democratic Labour Party being disloyal to Barbados, almost treasonable. That he's trying to vilify Barbados name and give it a wrong side, etc. But and I think he probably we would have done better. I say we then because it was part of the process at that time. If he had, because what was so ironic about it is that he stood his ground, stood by his morals and his commitment not to reveal it. Only to conquer that, Prime Minister Sanford, who was then Minister of Finance, said that rather than Barbados going to the IMF, the economy of Barbados performing like Gary Sober's strokes around the wicket. So once people said they was performing like Gary Sober's, people well, this is top notch. Mr. Ford cannot be correct. Only for some months after for us to go to the IMF and become part of that program, which had remember the reduct the 8% that whole austerity program. I think it was a standby arrangement too or something like that. But so he was proven right. History proven right. As a matter of fact, because of his whole caliber and his performance, Mr. Forde, it used to be often said that, particularly with the persons who work with him in government, that he was probably the best prime minister that Barbados never had. He was that highly regarded, that
Yes.
highly respected,
Oh yes.
which is a tremendous compliment. Especially coming out of a team that had engaged so many other illustrious persons. I mentioned Louis Tull. Louis Tull is retired also. Uh, Also, he's not in the public spotlight anymore. Nigel Barr has retired, and there are a few more around which don't really come to mind. But those were part of the kernels of the great combination that of which Mr. Ford was a leading light. Uh, uh, he won Christchurch West in '71, never looked back. He retired from it, uh, and
Well,
he's go ahead.
Glyne, if you don't mind me interrupting you for a minute, um, I regret, and this is probably the first time I'm ever saying this publicly. I regret not accepting Henry's invitation. We were on a flight back from Antigua. Myself, Dr. Williams, we had had a crusade in Antigua, and we were on our way back, and Sir Henry was on the flight, and we ended up actually sitting together. And he turned to me, Glyne, and offered me, because he was going to be stepping down from active politics, and he offered me his seat, asked me if I would be willing to run for Christchurch West, um, and take on the role from himself. And I declined, because back in those days we were taught that to get to step down from religious ministry to do politics was a step down, and that we would best serve the Lord in ministry. But I must say that that was a sure seat in for me, and I regret that decision that I made.
But in all honesty, I can see why you would have offered that to you because you had the profile which would suit that constituency profile. Because each constituency has a profile and an image, and you have to match your
Yeah.
candidate to what as they say fill the eyes of the people of that constituency. And I thought you given your personal profile in Barbados, your religious upbringing, you would have done quite well. I think in that constituency too.
Yeah,
But
I regret that decision, because he was such a man of integrity. I admired him. He was one of those politicians, Glenn, that you look up to, and you
yes,
admire, and if you could copy, you know what I
that's
mean? If you if
yeah,
you
that's right.
if you could clone, if you could clone, a phenomenal man, phenomenal. Anyhow, you go ahead. I just
So
thought I'd throw that in.
yeah, yeah, that's quite revealing. But I could see, knowing you
Yeah,
as I do and observing, I could see why he would have spotted the potential in you.
yeah,
But Parma's gain is Marcy Week shows Parma's loss is Marcy Week's gain. You are still serving people.
oh yes, oh
Right.
yes, oh
So
yes, oh
the
yes.
objective would the objective would have been still in politics because politics used to be considered again and again for Henry Ford, for Sir Gradiatos, Mr. Barrow, all those early stalwarts. So Hugh Springer, who sacrificed
Yes.
so much to build the U, all those who the founding fathers of Barbados really.
Mhm.
The fields and hills beyond recalling.
Yes.
They are the one who saw it as its purpose to people. Um, there was a time when those people when they ran for the house, they never got paid.
That's true. That's
Not a
true.
cent.
That's
And they
true.
would have had an election every year.
Hmm.
So you had to finance themselves. And that's why some of them were lawyers, because being a lawyer gave them some sense of financial independence. They could work for themselves and at the same time serve the public. And so that's why so many of them were lawyers because it gave them that outlook in the outreach in the community and a chance to be able to support themselves and their families at work. And that reminds me of something that after these men became so successful, the Henry Forde, the Thomas, the Bree St. John, etc., as lawyers, graduates, the camp in Barbados, you would approach 1976, where there was an upsurge of antipathy and animosity towards lawyers in politics.
Yes.
And then people talk about grassroots politicians because they want to show the contrast. Even though these very same lawyers were the ones who contributed to the development of Barbados to bring them to that point, uh, there was this resentment of lawyers, and people started about bringing. And I think, on reflection, I've been thinking about it over the last 2 years. On reflection, I think that was the beginning of people almost felt like anybody could be a successful politician. Anybody could be in the House of Assembly. Now, if at that time, I think between 76 and 81, we had when I was at the Advocate, uh, part of which I was the Advocate. There's only 15, 16 political parties in Barbados. Everybody was forming a political party because they thought it was just grassroots politician. That was the era of Eric Cillian, People's Pressure Group and Pressure
Yes.
Movement,
Yes.
all these minor parties, because this was a reaction against the dominance of the lawyer class at this time. And I think
Was the NDP formed around that time as well?
no, 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 they
That
came
came a
later.
little later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the NDP came in after later is 70. So Richie Henswood won the by election in 78, right? And then he went to the House and formed the NDP. The NDP came between 86 and 89, I think it was.
86 and 89. Yes.
Because
Yes.
the BLP had been in the opposition with 3 seats. They had the 2 seats of opposition in the Senate. And then some people crossed over from the Dems and joined with Richard Barr, etc., Peter Miller, and formed the NDP. And they
Right.
uprooted the BLP as a legitimate
Opposition.
opposition in the Senate. But I just to make my wrap-up point here. I think the beginning, that anti-lawyer movement and feeling and attitude um, um, led to the feeling that almost anybody could become a successful politician. And I think that, to me, looking back at it, that began to downgrade and reduce the caliber of person who were therefore prepared to enter the politics. And you see some of it now in the present House, our assembly, which really is not, it's probably the poorest for quality overall, based on their performances, based on their speeches. Some people say they're not allowed to speak. I can only go, I can't, I don't know about that, but I can only, when you base on what their pronouncement, either in the House Assembly or in public functions, it is a far cry from what it used to be. And the high standards set by stalwarts and icons like Sir Henry Ford, who was a living legend in his time, and fully deserves all the positivity that can be said about him on the Barbados political landscape.
Well,
I
I'll
think
tell
that
you.
takes up. I'm following the clock. So that takes up my
No,
time
no, no,
right
that's that. No, no, that's fine because I think one of the things that in Barbados we need because we're dealing with a generation that has come along now, Glyne. Persons like myself, I have to say that I am one of the blessed and fortunate. My era is one of the blessed and fortunate eras that have experienced what you're talking about and are now experiencing this new element of politics. But a lot of our younger ones, like my children, I mean, my children are up in 30 something years old now. They don't know anything about that. They've never experienced that level of representation and delivery and debate and discussion. They've never experienced that. The only thing they know is what they're currently seeing. But we have that. What I'm looking for, measuring standard, if you want to call it that. That's why you can talk about the quality of delivery of speeches now in Parliament does not match anything. And I must tell you, because I sat in Parliament with my mother on many occasions as a teenager, and listen to the debates in Parliament with Tom Adams and Errol Barrow and the whole gambit back then. I can't remember all of their names. Vic Johnson and Nigel, all of them. Sir Henry Forde himself, Bree St. John, Lionel Craig, and of course we had the members of the Democratic Labour Party as well. Uh, Branford Tate, Morris King. You're talking names that today, if we call them most of the what they call them Gen Z, I don't know if that's the right terminology, wouldn't even know what we were talking about. But the quality of presentation, and the thing about it, you use the word Glyne, that I believe is lacking in our country today: decent.
Yeah.
Our politicians that I grew up with were decent. They had the cut and thrust of debate like nobody's business, but there was a decency that covered their cut and thrust debate. And you know what used to get me upset, Glenn? I sat in the house and I watched the debates and the cut and thrust and this kind of stuff. And of course, I campaigned. I helped the campaign in 1976. Richie Haynes was running in St. George North against my cousin Fred Odell. Okay, up here in St. George North at that time, and I campaigned, and they won the government. The Barbados Labour Party won the government in 1976, and I went into the House of Assembly with my mother for a number of parliamentary, a number of meetings. And, I used to sit down and watch Errol Barr and Tom Adams going at one another's throats until one day I saw Tom gesticulate at Errol, and the two of them disappeared behind the speaker's chair. I don't know if you ever remember any of those days. They disappeared behind the speaker's chair and then came back out. Of course, I thought that they were going to kill one another, because of what we had just witnessed. And then we broke for lunch. And when I walked into the lunchroom, Glyne, my whole perspective to politics changed. When I saw Tom Adams and Errol Barr, Errol sitting at the end of the table, Tom sitting on the first seat next to him, and the two of them laughing and carrying on and conversing and whatnot. That was the level of relationship, decency, and respect that we
Because
had in
because
politics.
it was an intellectual contest. It was not a personal vendetta against anybody. As a matter of fact, I remember once Prime Minister Adams and Mr. Barrow had a bitter exchange across the Florida House. That's when it was Mr. Adams's personal assistant. And I said afterwards, I said, Prime Minister, I think Mr. Barrow had said some very harsh thing about Sir Grantley. So I said, Prime Minister, when people talk about your father like that, um, you must hate them. Huh? He said, no, Glyne. From the time I became Prime Minister, I did not hate anybody in Barbados. Everybody was behaving to me, and they treated that way.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so it is that engaging, open, respect for each other. Don't forget, a lot of them would have been went to the same universities, come from the
yep,
same social backgrounds. So there's a mutual respect. But the point I want to make about the quality, one reflects on the quality of speeches in and out of Parliament in Barbados. If you listen to the ministers, particularly, is that it shows a lot of reading. They do not have the facility with language and words and ideas, so they cannot communicate well. If you don't, one of the reasons why Mr. Thorne is so adept, why Mr. Barnes, because they're widely read,
yes,
read,
yes,
and so they
yes,
have facility with language. But if you only read the brief that comes to you, or read social media, and it's reflected in the inability of a chronic inability. And I know from my time in cabinet, you have to develop the idea, the capacity, the ability to translate and convert an idea, a thought, into a program and a policy and work it through the system. Many of them, I find, just give musings. You know about the muses and literature who are supposed to inspire you in thought. They think and they believe. There is not enough grounding in research, in data, in empirical evidence, and authorities to give a substantial speech. there's too much whimsical, superficial, and I think that's part of the problem. Why there's I mean, there's some ministry, the Ministry of Environment, like the Ministry of the Blue Economy. For years, I can't see a simple program come. No concept I can't see them operationalize that concept yet and give it. I'm not talking about cutting down trees and cleaning up bush. That is a traditional aspect of does the bushing. And Tom, where you can see industries and programs and policies and operations, exports, import coming out of that their idea. So you have to be able to translate a thought, an idea into a policy and program and projects, which is not happening. I think, and it's a limited. Okay, some of the limitations and the criticisms we have of the 11 plus, right? Where people don't do well enough in English because they don't read, is reflected in the House of Assembly. Plain and simple,
Yes, yes,
right?
you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. You know,
So
I've
you only get what you put in.
yes, I found for myself personally, Glyne, that and I hope for those of the loyal opposition that are listening to us, I have found in recent years that people expect a religious minister such as myself to be focused in religion, matters of faith and so on. But what I've found with myself is that I find no alternative but to develop my faith into the realities of my life. And in so doing, I find myself researching. That's why I talk about the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization. I read up on these organizations. And so when the Prime Minister comes back and starts to express certain things in Barbados, I know that that is something that has been expressed by an international entity and does not have its genesis within the context of what is happening in Barbados. That was not the case in our past politics in Barbados, Glenn. What Barbados? Huh?
No, I was going to say that the Prime Minister is probably the biggest offender in that respect. The Prime Minister depends too much. Having observed and worked with Prime Ministers, having observed Sograndi from Sograndi onwards, um, there's too much. The Prime Minister does not apply the discipline of researching and writing. Tom Adams and Owen Arthur writing handwriting their own speeches. They would take material but they went through and put it down on paper. That's why they would never lapse into something. Say you want money, you want money, you want money, you want money, because it's not part of the thought process. It's not put down on paper. It's a part of the structured. And I think her legacy and the Barbadian public understanding. I mentioned it later earlier today when I talk about a presumption in favor of development. That concept has never, or that practice has never been explained to Barbadians yet because it has not sat down or written down step one, two, three. This is what it is me. This is the impact. And so you do not get a chance to put the actions, the policies, the programs, the product into context of that same enunciated program and concept because there's nothing to judge it by. I say so, and therefore it must be so. Is really not that now, and therefore that is part of the problem of people understanding, appreciating, supporting for the same because they have the base minimum of information on which to go.
And that's why this cybercrime bill, to my mind, is so very dangerous, Glenn. And I'm not talking just from the perspective of the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, but I'm talking about the accessibility to information. Because when I listen to some of the European Union leaders, when I listen to some of what you would probably refer to today as the liberal politicians, what I'm hearing is that they're trying to restrict the accessibility to information only to what government permits you to express. And so when I look at the cybercrime bill and I realize that it is a violation of many human rights positions, in terms of its expression, listening, observing what I've read and learned in the Budapest Convention and so on. When I look at it, what I see is an attempt to restrict the accessibility to information so that you can only hear what we allow you to hear. That was the strategy, Glyne, during the pandemic. We're today, I heard some comments in the press briefing today. I can't verify all of them, and as a result I'm not going to repeat them. But I heard of situations, or there was a situation referred to, people dropping dead. And it has happened. And I have spoken to a young lady whose fiance um, had administered the appropriate treatments to engage what we have just gone through. As you would know, I have to be very careful what I say with respect to this, so that Marcia Weeks's platform is not penalized. But she indicated to me that he took the recommended procedures to avoid certain things, and as a result of it, to get a particular job. And as a result of it, one day he came out, took up the keys of the car, turned to the fiance and the children, and said, "Let's go and get something to eat." And Glyne, as soon as he said to get something to eat, he just dropped down dead right on the floor, just like that. Boom. And this has been happening quite a bit. And I remember the Prime Minister having a conversation with what's her name, Amanpour, of CNN. And in that conversation, she was talking about controlling the information that citizens receive.
But Forde, they've been doing it for the last 6 years straight.
Yes, they've been
Straight.
trying to do that.
They talk about transparency and accountability. Talk about
So no, no, no.
they talk about where's the Freedom of Information Act? Where is
Exactly.
that? Where is that?
Exactly.
Where are the regular? They had been in the 2018 manifesto. It had been promised that you'd get regular or I would say regular post cabinet press briefings. I read a paper something called Turks and Caicos Island Sun,
Hmm.
run by a Barbadian journalist called, so work at the nation with me, called Hayden Boyce. That
Yeah.
is a weekly paper, but they bring a summary of the, except for matters dealing with, except by dealing with security.
Security.
They
Yeah.
give a summary every few weeks of decisions taken by cabinet at the meeting. They decided that, they recommend that, so the public know what's going on. Right now, we only get the occasional glimpse of material from them when they choose in their interest to tell you what they want to hear. As a matter of rule, I do not take what spokespersons or PR officers or information specialists are, because their job is to make their employer look good and sound good. Bring me somebody with accountability so they can hold up to scrutiny, and they have legitimacy because they are bound by the law, and they have responsibility to the public. That is why, for example, there's an officer now, a recent officer attached to Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education, which has been serviced since the 50s, but the Government Information Service still has, each ministry has government information officers attached to them. But then you found it possible, this government found it possible to employ a, a, what, an information and communication specialist for the Ministry of Education. Why? Why? When you already have a chief education officer, a permanent secretary, plus you have GIS, but this is just another part of the same fraternity, the
Yes.
three
Yes.
S thing. I mean,
Yes.
it's ridiculous. So therefore, we need persons. And part of the problem why the government often runs ahead with is that the people don't have enough information. The Prime Minister has held one live interview with a serious journalist. I mean, I don't mean where you comment on the sideline or somewhere you just get a few, but she sat down with David Ellis in June 1989. June, not 99, no, sorry. June 19, June 2018. June, July 20, probably July 2018. Because it's 3 months, yeah. For one interview with David. And I did not, and I'm not surprised she's never had that, because when David, as he should, and he, as a good journalist and a professor, pressed her on certain matters, on two occasions, she said, David, like, you ain't done this on one-upmanship. In other words, you try to show that you know more about what I'm talking about than me. And so it is that contempt for the media that they therefore are able to control. And I remember, one of the things I respect most about former advisor Avinash Prasad, I was engaged once on a radio program, and I asked him, why would you refuse to come and give information to the public? I think we were talking about the confusion over canceling for pensions, people getting two pensions, they want to take it away, they'll get one, their hearts. He said that we decide what we're going to talk about, the rest we ignore. And they clearly live on that every day.